I mean, you mentioned that just the convenience of this coalition of getting Netanyahu out does provide an opening, which is really great, and a silver lining for the left in Israel that I feel like hasn't been seen for a long time. But you write in your piece in Plus 972 magazine, which I'd encourage everyone to check out, that 101 of the 120 Knesset seats are Jewish supremacist seats, and that's a significant percentage. I'm terrible at math, but that's a lot of right-wing Jewish supremacy seats, and I'm not even sure how one overcomes that, which is just, I mean, from a Palestinian perspective, that's incredibly daunting.
I agree. It's definitely troubling. But the interesting thing in this coalition is that those other 20, the more progressive voices that you have in Knesset, are actually, some of them or most of them are actually a part of the coalition. So that question of how much they intervene, they did go into this coalition with the main goal of getting rid of Netanyahu, but at the same time, now they're in power. The coalition depends on them. So just as Naftali Bennett, who commands only 6 seats in Knesset out of 120, was able to extract becoming prime minister, which is completely unheard of in Israeli politics, that the head of such a small party gets to be prime minister. And he was able to get that just because the others wanted to get rid of Netanyahu so badly. Just as that happened, we now have the left that is part of this coalition. The coalition depends on the left, and it can draw a line. It can say, as we've seen before, or are seeing right now with the citizenship law, it can stop other policies from happening. It won't be able to stop each and every right-wing policy from happening because it doesn't want to lose power. It doesn't want this coalition to collapse. So it'll be a very, very interesting game of just where they decide to draw the line and where they give up. I'm afraid that one of the central pieces on which they are already giving up is the occupation. You don't see the left demanding removing the siege on Gaza or ending the occupation. They know they don't have enough power to make that happen. So it'll be in smaller policy questions, but the big questions of this reality of Israeli or Jewish supremacy, that is not something that's going to shift, unfortunately.
Which, brings me to kind of where we'll wrap shortly is from your perspective, how does the left seize back power? I mean, what does it take? To me, based on my read of things and based on what I've read of your work, it's got to be some sort of international loss. The United States backing out of protecting Israel because of the violation of United Nations terms and human rights violations, etc. Perhaps, adjusting its posture, which we are not seeing under Biden whatsoever. And its European allies doing the same. Would you imagine that that's kind of the moment that would spur some sort of change and a resurgent left, that would be the necessary kind of moment for that to happen?
So I think there are different external factors that might affect where the left is going. Definitely international pressure to end apartheid, which I think is an important thing in of itself, will change Israeli politics. The same can be said of a massive Palestinian uprising that will once again kind of force Israelis to contend with the reality of occupation, just how violent it is towards Palestinians when they need to contend with Palestinian resistance. So those two things are kind of external factors to Israeli politics. At the same time, I don't want to make it easier on the Israeli left by saying, just let's sit and wait until one of these external factors happens, and then we'll get this opportunity to make a difference. I think the left has a responsibility to actually make a stand, to go back to having a very explicit ideology and fighting for that ideology. What we've seen in recent years, essentially the left give up on most of its ideology to this point of anything but Netanyahu, accepting Bennett as a replacement for Netanyahu, and that is part of this the schism of the Israeli society that was formed around this one person. But with Netanyahu removed, Israeli politics can reorganize itself, hopefully. And a part of that has to be for the left to offer a comprehensive agenda, both of the occupation, but also a progressive social agenda and a progressive agenda on climate and on gender and on other issues within the Israeli society itself, and try and win support as the left should do everywhere. So we've not seen something like that coming from the left in a very, very long time. The focus on just fighting back Netanyahu has been, I think, decapitating in many ways for the left. And now there's this opportunity to actually stand up and say, we want to fight for our own policies. And I think that's a huge burden on the people in coalition to make that struggle from within, or to say at some point, we can't go on with this coalition. We're selling out our values and prolonging not the rule of Netanyahu, but the rule of the right. And at some point, they would have to leave this coalition and say, we want an alternative.
Well, thank you so much, Haggai Matar, award-winning Israeli journalist and executive director of Plus 972 Magazine's Advancement of Citizen Journalism. People can find your work there. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you very much.
Folks, there's more of what you've just saw where that came from. That's if you hit the subscribe and like button. Thank you. Really, thank you.